The reading this morning is from Juliette Kayyem. She's a former Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security under President Obama, and today is the faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. She's also a national security analyst for CNN. She says this: I have come to believe, as a security expert, but also as a mother of three, that among all of its flaws, the worst aspect of Never Again was that it let experts like me run the show. We have failed to show that the conflicts and choices inherent in protecting the homeland are really not that different from those Americans and people around the world encounter every day. In our day-to-day lives, people try to protect those closest to them, but they also plan for the bad things that will happen. The essential aspects of those two priorities, preparedness, planning, flexibility, communication, backup systems, learning from mistakes, are essentially the same for both. By too easily separating the homeland from the home, experts have failed to nurture the vigor and resiliency, which is the greatest strength of a nation that was built on vulnerability, the American public. And if the United States could build resiliency one home at a time, maybe in another 15 years, the country will have stopped asking the question to some anonymous bureaucracy with strange acronyms and esoteric risk assessments. Are we safer? Instead, people should start embracing, am I ready? That's the end of the reading. Now, imagine this scene. It's a quiet morning in the downtown of any American city. The streets are quiet. A milk truck delivery goes by. It's a golden sunrise. Suddenly, over the horizon, massive flying saucers appear, so large that they blot out the sun. Whoever could have expected this? The latest military technology is hurled against these invaders, but all of our military might is no match for them, and, to quote H.G. Wells from War of the Worlds, never before in the history of the world had such a mass of human beings moved and suffered together. The legendary hosts of Goths and Huns, the hugest armies Asia has ever seen, would have been but a drop in that current. And this was no disciplined march. It was a stampede gigantic and terrible, without order and without goal. 6 million people, unarmed and unprovisioned, driving headlong. It was the beginning of the rout of civilization, of the massacre of mankind. End quote. Now, imagine that distinction that security analyst Juliette Kayyem suggests. The difference between those who asked, are we safer, and those who have embraced, am I ready? You see the difference in the two questions. The answer to the question, am I safe, is always necessarily no. Because no one is safe, not ever really. Why? Because being safe and being alive are incompatible things. Certainly some people are relatively safer than other people, and some people have more wrapping and padding and connections than other people, but no one is ever safe, really. That's the human condition. We and all we love are fragile and contingent. We can pretend otherwise, but the pretense is an illusion. Yet many of us expect our government to keep us safe. A thoughtful security analyst tells us that that is not going to happen. Still, let's be real. It is the very function of governments to assure the safety of citizens. Yet this guarantee is, on the other hand, an illusion. But let's think about that foundational document of the United States, our Constitution, the first words, we the people. In order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. To form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Let me go down that list one more time. Is our union becoming more perfect? Are we establishing justice? Do we have domestic tranquility? What are we defended against? Is there general welfare? Have we secured the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity? Sounds like a list of failures to me. This past week, we watched as our fellow citizens broke the most fundamental rules of a civil society, disregarding simple instructions designed to protect the vulnerable population and healthcare workers in order to protest and assert their rights as individuals. We're always debating what the framers of the Constitution did and didn't think, but again, that list: justice, tranquility, common defense, general welfare. What is wrong here? Juliette Kayyem gets at the crux of the matter. Government fails because we as individuals fail to do our part. We expect safety, but too often we see safety as a right, not a responsibility. Those ideals in the Constitution are communal values. I don't care whether you agree with the philosophy of the Constitution or not. I don't care whether you believe that the framers of the Constitution were Christian or not. Doesn't matter. The words there are very clear. They enumerate communal values. And those communal values are about common responsibility. Are we safe? No, no one is ever really safe. As Juliette Kayyem writes in the reading this morning, the better question is, am I ready? The first question leads to false conclusions. It's asking the impossible of a government. Every dawn, we will all be asleep. The second question leads to a truthfully contingent answer. I'm as ready as I can be. I'm watching. I am prepared to act. But notice that there's a higher moral commitment than just I and me and mine in these words from the Constitution. Whatever their religious commitments, I'm fairly sure many, if not most, of the framers of the Constitution saw that "we the people" phrase is about acting from moral commitments higher and outside the Constitution, acting as a we and an us. So let's think about that "am I ready" question. Lots of people are saying that the present moment in this pandemic in general feels surreal and unreal, that it's extraordinary. But that gets the situation exactly backwards. The fragility of life that we all are experiencing today, that's the human experience. That's the truth of being alive on this planet. That bubble, that pink cloud of security, that's the illusion. As I've said before, it always was a function of privilege. Are we safer? Think of all the security measures after 9/11 back in 2001. Think of the focus on are we safer? Think about how that failed, because in 2005, Hurricane Katrina occurred. How important were all those anti-terrorism measures to those people standing on their rooftops waiting to be saved? Safer. Safer from what? We were safer from that thing that had already happened. We weren't safer from another thing that was going to happen next. We were safer, but we were not ready because we had not talked about responsibility or readiness. we had only talked about airplanes and terrorism. The title of my talk today is At Dawn We Slept as Usual. At Dawn We Slept is the title of a 1981 book by historian Gordon William Prang and Donald Goldstein, who was working from Dr. Prang's notes after Prang died. Prang was the chief historian on General Douglas MacArthur's staff in occupied Japan after the Second World War. He had first-hand eyewitness testimony. Prang wanted to figure out who was to blame for a massive military failure. At Dawn We Slept is about December 7th, 1941, and the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The facts are not in dispute. At 7:53 a.m., Japanese fighter planes attacked U.S. ships at anchor at Pearl Harbor. It was an attack that took the U.S. fleet completely by surprise. It was a devastating defeat to the U.S. military, and none of that is in dispute. What is in dispute is who was responsible for that massive failure. It was, after all, completely avoidable. The title, At Dawn We Slept, is a statement of fact. The why is still not known. We also slept on that dawn of September 11th, 2001. The why is still debatable. We can assign blame, but in fact, the disaster occurred because of multiple factors. All disasters always occur because of multiple factors. We slept on that dawn of August 23rd, 2005, as Hurricane Katrina bore down on the city of New Orleans. We also slept as the novel coronavirus spread across the planet in late 2019 and early 2020. Fact is, we're always going to be asleep. The next disaster won't be like the last disaster or the one before that. The fact is that we are never safer due to the fact that the next disaster is necessarily unknown. No government can ever cover every contingency. What we can do is ask ourselves, are we ready? That is not a question of having all of our bases covered. It's a question of seeing reality for the confusing mess that it actually is, and developing resilience, both socially and personally. As Shakespeare has his character Hamlet say, the readiness is all. Let's face it, the Western world is torn between two poles, individual worth and dignity at one pole, and the common good at the other pole. And these are often incompatible, not always, but often. We've been sleeping at a lot of dawns the past several years as our democratic institutions have crumbled before assaults unimagined by the framers of the Constitution. Democracy is not a one and done thing. It's a complex set of values that must be openly and seriously debated all the time. Democracy doesn't make us safe, but it can make us ready. Winston Churchill did not say, we can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else. But that misattribution is out there because it speaks a truth about the collective psyche of United States citizens. We believe in doing something, even if it's wrong. Furthermore, if that attempt doesn't work, we're going to try something else. Take, for example, U.S. attempts at nation building and spreading democracy. We aren't very good on that record, are we? We've also held on to that city upon a hill things for so long that the phrase American exceptionalism has become a wink and a smirk worldwide. The persistently wrong attempt at the everything else that is currently killing Americans is our mind-bogglingly dumb conviction that we are somehow Fortress America, surrounded by uncrossable seas and impenetrable walls. The cosmopolitans among us have always known better. No, we don't have the best healthcare system in the world. We don't have a system. We don't have the best transportation system. We don't have the best economy. You get the picture. Yes, perhaps it goes back to that city upon a hill thing that's woven into the very fabric of the American experience. Talk about exceptionalism and some Christian crusading going on. I admit I'm too old and cynical to think that these persistent myths will die easily or anytime soon. Still, those of us dedicated to a peaceful and progressive world community where all people treat each other as neighbors, we can reach out in this time of globally shared loss and vulnerability and dislocation. We can work right now toward a United States that comes down off its hill and joins the world community in both vulnerability and in strength. Now, here's something that Winston Churchill did say. The price of greatness is responsibility. The price of greatness is responsibility. It's time we listen to voices like Churchill and Juliet Kayyem from the reading this morning. The question is not, are we safer? Instead, we must embrace, am I ready? Ready for what? Well, that's just the point, isn't it? We have to be ready for anything because no one is safe. But those who are safer than others must step up to do that hard work. And how are we going to step up? Well, another good question. And the answer, I think, always is, am I ready? Mentally, psychically, spiritually, emotionally. As the human rights activist Marian Wright Edelman once said, service is the rent we pay for being. It is the very purpose of life and not something you do in your spare time. Our purpose right now today is to wake up and realize we are not safe. We are, however, ready to join in and cooperate. If you will repeat with me, please. B. Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.